In the story of America's Revolution, certain names stand tall as heroes: Washington, Franklin, Lafayette. But then there is one name that lingers like a shadow across the pages of history: Benedict Arnold. He was not always a villain. In fact, he was once celebrated as one of the most daring and brilliant commanders in the Continental Army. His courage on the battlefield was legendary, his victories crucial to the survival of the Revolution. For a time, he stood shoulder to shoulder with the architects of liberty. And yet, his legacy is not one of triumph, but of treachery. Today, when we hear his name, we think not of his victories, but of betrayal. The betrayal that nearly shattered America's fight for independence. How could a man who risked his life for freedom become the most infamous traitor of the Revolution? Was it greed, ambition, wounded pride, or something darker? This is not just the story of Benedict Arnold, the general. It is the tale of a man torn between glory and resentment, of secret plots and dangerous liaisons, of choices that changed the course of history. His astonishing fall from hero to traitor remains one of the most gripping and tragic sagas of the American Revolution. Benedict Arnold was born on January 14, 1741, in Norwich, Connecticut colony. His childhood was far from charmed. Once prosperous, the Arnold family fell into financial ruin after his father's business collapsed, and his father sank into alcoholism. Young Benedict grew up surrounded by whispers of shame, determined to erase the dishonor that clung to his family name. For him, honor and reputation would become obsessions, fueling his ambition and, in time, shaping his downfall. As a boy, Arnold was restless, fiery, and daring. He trained as an apothecary's apprentice, but his heart craved more than medicine bottles and quiet days behind a shop counter. Adventure called to him. He briefly joined militias during the French and Indian War, but it was in business, smuggling, trading, and sailing, that he cut his teeth as a bold risk-taker. By the eve of the Revolution, Arnold was already known as a man who demanded respect and would fight fiercely to gain it. When the first shots of the Revolution rang out at Lexington and Concord in 1775, Arnold wasted no time throwing himself into the cause. Here was his chance. A rebellion not just against British authority, but an opportunity to carve his name into history. He marched with a militia company to Massachusetts and quickly revealed his leadership. He was no ordinary soldier, he was a commander in the making. It was Arnold who pushed for and took part in the daring seizure of Fort Ticonderoga, a critical stronghold on Lake Champlain. Working alongside the flamboyant Ethan Allen and his Green Mountain Boys, Arnold secured much-needed cannons and supplies for the Continental Army. Those weapons, dragged across mountains in a grueling winter trek, would later help drive the British from Boston. Few acts of bravery were as pivotal in the early war, and Benedict Arnold was right at the center. This was just the beginning. Arnold's audacity carried him further north into the wilds of Canada, where he led one of the most grueling expeditions of the entire war. Through freezing rain, swamps, and starvation, he marched men across hundreds of miles of wilderness in a bold attempt to capture Quebec. Though the mission ended in failure, Arnold's courage earned him admiration among soldiers. To many, he was already a hero, a man willing to risk everything for the cause of liberty. And yet, beneath this heroic veneer, the seeds of conflict were already stirring. Arnold was ambitious, quick to anger, and unwilling to tolerate slights to his honor. His bravery was undeniable, but so was his pride. The Revolution gave him glory, but it also gave him rivals, jealousies, and grudges that would simmer dangerously in the years ahead. Benedict Arnold was not just a patriot. He was a man on fire, determined to prove himself at all costs. But, as history would soon reveal, the same fire that lit his path to heroism would one day consume him in betrayal. If Benedict Arnold's earlier exploits had won him admiration, it was at Saratoga that he etched his name into the heart of the Revolution. The year was 1777, and the stakes could not have been higher. The British, under General John Burgoyne, launched a bold campaign to sever New England from the rest of the colonies. If they succeeded, the Revolution itself might collapse. The Hudson River Valley became the stage for a showdown that would decide the fate of America. Arnold, despite nursing grudges against Congress and quarreling with fellow officers, was once again called to the front. For him, battles were more than military necessity. They were opportunities to prove his worth, and at Saratoga he would prove it with fire and fury. The fighting stretched over weeks, with skirmishes erupting in the dense woods and along rough terrain. Arnold was restless, driven by instinct and a thirst for action. He clashed repeatedly with General Horatio Gates, the cautious commander of the American forces. Gates favored defense, preferring to wait behind fortifications. Arnold, impatient and daring, demanded bold strikes. Their feud was so bitter that Gates eventually relieved Arnold of command. But Arnold could not be contained. When the Second Battle erupted on October 7, 1777, he defied orders and stormed on to the battlefield. Mounted on his horse, he led charge after charge, rallying troops who wavered under the British assault. Musket balls whistled through the air, cannon fire shook the earth, and yet Arnold seemed unstoppable, a whirlwind of defiance. Soldiers followed him with renewed courage, shouting his name as they surged forward. At the key moment of the battle, Arnold led an assault on the British defenses at the fortified positions of Bemis Heights. It was chaos, smoke, screams, blood, but Arnold's ferocity shattered the enemy lines. His leadership turned the tide, and Burgoyne's army began to collapse. America had its victory, and with it came the turning point of the entire Revolution. But the victory came at a cost. Arnold's leg was shattered by a musket ball, the same leg that had carried him into glory in Canada. He fell, badly wounded, and nearly lost his life. The injury would leave him permanently crippled, the bone never healing properly. Yet even as he lay in agony, soldiers hailed him as the true hero of Saratoga. It was this victory that convinced France to throw its weight behind the Revolution, providing the alliance and supplies that would ultimately secure American independence. And yet, when Congress handed out promotions and recognition, Arnold's name was pushed aside. His rival, Horatio Gates, basked in the spotlight, while Arnold lay in a sickbed, nursing both his wound and his wounded pride. Here was the cruel paradox. The man who had helped save the Revolution was left feeling abandoned by the very cause he had fought for. To Arnold, the injustice cut deep. He had given his blood, his body, his future, and in return, he received neglect. Saratoga was both his greatest triumph and the beginning of his fall. The victory made him a hero, but the slight he felt afterward planted the seeds of resentment that would soon grow into betrayal. The glory of Saratoga should have been Benedict Arnold's crowning moment. His battlefield courage had tipped the scales of history. His blood had been spilled for the cause, and yet, when honors were handed out, he was left in the shadows. General Horatio Gates, the cautious commander who had tried to restrain him, basked in the fame. Congress, swayed by political maneuvering, promoted others while Arnold's name was quietly brushed aside. For a man like Arnold, proud, ambitious, and obsessed with honor, this was more than a slight. It was a wound deeper than the musket ball in his leg, and, unlike his shattered limb, this wound festered in silence. Confined to recovery, Arnold found himself restless, bitter, and angry. He wrote letter after letter demanding recognition, insisting on justice for his sacrifices. What he received instead was suspicion. Rumors swirled, whispers that he misused funds, accusations that he profited from war. Though some charges were unfounded, they clung to him like a stain. His rivals in Congress and the Army seemed determined to cut him down. Then came Philadelphia. In 1778, Arnold was appointed as the military governor of the city after the British evacuation. It was meant to be an honor, a prestigious post in one of the most important cities of the Revolution. But Arnold soon found himself caught between two worlds. Philadelphia was a city divided. Patriots filled the streets with fiery speeches and revolutionary zeal, but wealthy loyalists still held influence behind closed doors. Among them was the Shippen family, aristocratic, refined, and unapologetically tied to British sympathies. And it was here that Arnold met Peggy Shippen. Peggy was beautiful, cultured, and barely 18 when Arnold, a battle-scarred general in his late 30s, fell under her spell. She was not only a partner, but also a doorway, a link between Arnold and a different kind of world, one where loyalty to the crown was still fashionable. Through Peggy, Arnold came into contact with British officers, including the charming and cunning Major John André. Their marriage in 1779 cemented Arnold's ties to Loyalist society. Patriots began to whisper, was their war hero drifting toward the enemy? At the same time, Arnold's lifestyle in Philadelphia raised more eyebrows. He lived lavishly, spending far beyond his means, and his enemies accused him of corruption. Soon, Congress ordered him to face a court-martial. For Arnold, this was the breaking point. A man who had once thrown himself into battle for liberty now felt cornered, unappreciated, and humiliated. In his eyes, the revolution no longer repaid sacrifice with honor. It repaid it with suspicion, jealousy, and disgrace. It was in this soil of bitterness that the seeds of treason began to grow. Peggy, with her Loyalist ties, nurtured the idea. Major André, with his promises of wealth and recognition, gave it shape. And Arnold, consumed by pride and resentment, began to listen. The hero of Saratoga was slowly transforming into the traitor of West Point. But no one, not Congress, not Washington, not even Arnold's fellow officers, saw the betrayal that was already taking root. By 1780, Benedict Arnold had grown weary of waiting for justice. He was no longer the rising star of the Revolution, but a man overshadowed, crippled by wounds, and hounded by accusations. To him, the cause he had once bled for seemed unworthy of further sacrifice. The time had come, he decided, to switch sides. Through secret letters, written in invisible ink and passed through intermediaries, Arnold began negotiating with the British. His contact was Major John André, the suave, silver-tongued officer who served as the head of British intelligence. Their bargain was bold. Arnold would betray the American cause in exchange for money and rank in the British Army. The prize he offered was no ordinary spoil. It was West Point. West Point, perched high above the Hudson River, was the crown jewel of American defenses. Whoever held it controlled the lifeline between New England and the southern colonies. If the British seized it, they could strangle the Revolution in two, and Arnold, now commander of the fortress, was in the perfect position to deliver it. The plan was simple, but its implications were catastrophic. Arnold agreed to weaken the defenses, scatter supplies, and leave West Point vulnerable at the exact moment the British would strike. For this act of treason, he was promised $20,000, a fortune that would have made him one of the richest men in the colonies, and the prestige of serving as a general under the king's banner. But treachery has a way of unraveling. In September 1780, Arnold arranged to meet André in secret near the Hudson. By moonlight, the two men conspired, trading coded messages and battle plans. Yet fate turned against them. As André tried to return to British lines, he was stopped by American militiamen near Tarrytown. Hidden in his boot were papers revealing every detail of Arnold's plot. The capture of André was a disaster for Arnold. When word reached him that his co-conspirator was in American hands, panic surged through his veins. George Washington himself was on his way to inspect West Point, and discovery was inevitable. In a frantic escape, Arnold abandoned his post, racing to the river and boarding a British warship just ahead of capture. His wife, Peggy, staged a scene of hysterics to distract Washington and his aides, buying Arnold precious minutes to flee. Major John André was not so fortunate. Though admired by both sides for his bravery and charm, he was condemned as a spy and hanged. His dignified death won him sympathy, while Arnold's cowardly flight won him nothing but hatred. In one chilling moment, the revolution had come within a hair's breadth of disaster. If André had not been caught, West Point might have fallen, and with it, perhaps the revolution itself. Instead, America survived, but its most brilliant soldier had become its most despised traitor. From this point on, Benedict Arnold's name would never again be spoken as a hero's. He had crossed the line from patriot to betrayer, his ambition forever sealed by the ink of treason. Benedict Arnold's escape to the British lines marked the point of no return. Once, his name had been spoken with admiration around campfires and in taverns across the colonies. Now, it was spat like poison. To Americans, he was not simply a man who switched sides. He was the traitor, the embodiment of betrayal itself. Yet Arnold believed his new allegiance would bring him the recognition and respect that had been denied by Congress. The British welcomed him, but their embrace was cold. Soldiers and officers alike regarded him with suspicion. If he had betrayed his own countrymen, what stopped him from betraying them as well? Trust was a currency Arnold could never again afford. He was commissioned as a brigadier general in the British Army and given command of raids along the American coast. Towns in Virginia and Connecticut felt his wrath as he led attacks that burned homes, destroyed supplies, and terrorized civilians. But far from winning admiration, these actions painted him as a monster. To the patriots, he was no longer a misguided soldier. He was a villain who preyed on his own people. Even the British, while using his knowledge, whispered behind his back, mocking the man who had traded honor for gold. Back in America, his name became a curse. To call someone a Benedict Arnold was to call them the lowest of traitors. Even children in the streets hurled it as an insult. His former comrades, men who had once fought at his side, now spoke of him with venom. George Washington, the commander who had trusted him, mourned not his betrayal, but the tragedy of his wasted potential. When the war ended in 1783, Arnold and Peggy sailed for England, expecting to find comfort and status. Instead, they discovered isolation. British society never fully accepted him. Politicians refused to give him meaningful posts, officers avoided his company, and common citizens treated him with contempt. He had sacrificed everything: his honor, his reputation, his homeland, for a promise that never truly materialized. He tried business ventures, but most failed. He attempted to serve Britain abroad, but each attempt ended in disappointment. Everywhere he went, the shadow of his betrayal followed him. He was too much of an American for the British and too much of a traitor for the Americans. As the years dragged on, Arnold grew sickly and bitter. He quarreled with old allies, fought lawsuits, and nursed the wounds of a man unloved by both the country he betrayed and the one he served. By the time he lay dying in 1801, his health broken, his fortunes diminished, and his reputation forever stained, Benedict Arnold had become a living ghost, a reminder of ambition twisted into treachery. Legend holds that in his final moments he asked to be buried in the uniform of the Continental Army, the cause he had once championed and then abandoned. Whether true or not, the story captures the torment of a man who had soared as a hero but was doomed to be remembered as America's most infamous traitor. In the end, Benedict Arnold had gained neither glory nor honor. His name survived, but only as a warning, echoing across centuries of American history.